Ooh, we got to talk about the Trump tariffs. Let me move this microphone closer. Trump said, hit him with the T's, hit him with the tariff. 6 to 7 on you. 30, no. You hit notice for 6 to 7, I'm hit you 34. I'm going to give you the tariff, but I'm going to give you a discount. An employee discount.
Those with good eyes, with bad eyes.
Have you seen this?
We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here.
It's
We
the
didn't
Trump
want to bring
tariffs.
out the big, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will.
He said
Now we're gonna
reciprocal,
charge,
but discounted.
European Union.
Life in America just got a whole lot more expensive. We watched the video. We watched the whole Rose Garden presentation of the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your first thought?
Okay, so my first thoughts are he presented it in a way that makes it seem reasonable, in a way that he's saying they're charging us higher tariffs. We're going to do them a favor and charge them lower tariffs.
Mm-hmm. He framed it almost like he was doing the other countries a favor.
Like, yeah, he framed it as if the United States is being more reasonable by charging the lower tariff.
You see, I don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think he's being reasonable to the countries that he's charging the tariffs to. I think he's actually being reasonable to the Americans that are going to have to pick up the bill for that tariff. Whatever percent he charges on goods coming into the U.S., Americans that buy those goods are going to have to pick up that bill. If he charged the reciprocal tariff, then Americans would be paying much higher prices. It would crash the economy because America isn't independent enough to do without a lot of its imports. It needs those imports.
Mm.
So when I saw the reciprocal tariffs and I saw the discount, I don't see it as a favor for the countries that the tariff is being levied against. I see it as almost a favor to the American people. And that's like, to me, that's kind of slick that he's framing it as a favor to the country, when in reality, it's like softening the big blow to Americans.
Mm. So you think that, for example, if he charges a 30% tariff, those companies that are hit with the tariffs are going to raise their prices, and that will impact the American people. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that companies will necessarily raise the price of their goods or services at the same rate that they're being taxed at that higher tariff. So for example, say it's like a 30% tariff. Mm-hmm. I don't think that companies are going to raise their products and services or goods by 30%. Mm-hmm. I think they will have to increase in order to keep a profit margin that they want. Their profit margin may get smaller because of the tariffs, but I don't know that it's going to be that high of an increase to American consumers. It will be higher, just not the equivalent.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that the companies can do it all at once, especially. I think a lot of the U.S. companies, and this is why the stock market is like, I know when the stock market opens after this announcement, it is going to plummet because companies are going to see less profits. And also the tariffs present like this uncertainty because we don't really know how long the tariffs will be put in place. And so companies are like, how should we plan for these tariffs? Should we plan on like adjusting costs for a temporary time frame? Should we think about totally redoing how we're doing manufacturing and maybe moving it back to the US or moving it to another one of the other countries that has lower tariffs? So I think all the uncertainty about the tariffs presents chaos for the companies.
But I also think there's going to be some really interesting long-term impacts of this, because let's say that all of these tariffs come into place and then the economy is so shifted, so volatile, so difficult for Americans to bear, that the Trump administration starts rolling back some of the tariffs, maybe decreasing them or just trying to manipulate things a little bit more so that there's less of an impact on the American consumer. I think what's interesting is that once companies raise their prices to reflect what they need in terms of adjusting for these tariffs, I don't see companies later coming back and reducing those prices. So let's say they have like a 30% tariff that's charged, and then, 6 months later, a year later, even 2 years later, the Trump administration says, okay, let's try and modify these tariffs a little bit more. Let's work with these other countries and figure out a happy medium and bring the tariffs back down. I don't see that once companies start charging a higher price and they realize, oh, we can charge this price and these products or these services are still being consumed. I don't see when they if they were to get a lower tariff, for them to say, oh, we'll reflect that in the prices and reduce it for the Americans. They'll just see a larger profit margin.
Yeah. So this goes back to my other concern about these tariffs. Inflation just got under control, right? Interest rates were starting to come back down. And what's going to happen now is that inflation is going to go back up. And when inflation goes up, that means interest rates also go up. Mm-hmm. So many side effects are gonna take place because of this. You know what I think is interesting about the tariff argument is that the idea that by imposing these tariffs, manufacturing will come back to the U.S. But the idea with free trade is that the trade allows companies to bring costs down, right? When they outsource parts or manufacturing to other countries that can do it maybe more efficiently, that have resources at cheaper levels, that don't have as many expenses as are in the US, then it brings the cost down, right? Mm-hmm. So if manufacturing comes back to the US, will it really be cheaper for people? It's probably going to be a lot more expensive. The cost of healthcare, the cost of just life in America requires you to pay your workers a lot more here. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that when those jobs do come back, things are going to be more expensive as a result of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if jobs come back to the United States, the cost of products or services, they are actually going to be higher than if the tariff remained as it is. Because if you look across the world, all of the different cost of living price points for all of these different countries is so significantly dispersed. So if you have all of your employees living in the United States and you're paying them a fair wage compared to if they're living in another country and the fair wage is significantly lower than here and the cost of living is significantly lower than the United States, then I think moving an entire production back to the States, you have to take that into account. And I think those costs would exceed the costs that companies would be hit with these tariffs.
Yeah.
And so to me, I mean, the tariff would have to be just, insanely high in order for companies to realize that they could manufacture something cheaper in the States compared to paying the tariff.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is interesting about these tariffs is competition. The idea of manufacturing everything in the U.S., how does that affect global competition and innovation? So, if you look at like the car industry, for example, Toyota, Honda, BMW, Ford, GM, all of these car brands are competing against each other in the U.S. to manufacture the best cars, the safest cars, the cars that have, the greatest fuel efficiency, the greatest energy efficiency. How does that impact that competition between all of these car companies? Mm-hmm. So I think that is also a concern for like multiple industries. I mean, when you look at wine, we love wine, right? But honestly, some of the best wine is manufactured in France, right? Champagne is from France. Port wine from Porto. When you look at like tequila, the best tequila comes from South America. So how do you recreate that quality in the U.S., right? And how expensive it would be. We can get a bottle of wine here in Portugal for $3.
Yeah.
Right. When that same bottle of wine goes to the U.S., maybe it's $30. But with these tariffs, it's gonna be like $50. So the question is, are wine producers in the U.S. gonna start producing the same quality of wine, the same amount of wine, and will they maintain a lower price, or will they bring their price higher because they won't have that
Competition.
that European competition?
Yeah.
The bottom line from all of these tariffs is that the cost of living in the U.S. is going to go up. There's going to be some uncertainty. The economic situation in the U.S. is probably going to slow down. We're most likely looking at a recession. And the administration has even telegraphed this. They've said when they start to implement these tariffs, things are going to be a little rough, right? They're framing it like short-term sacrifice for for long-term benefit. And so I think people need to read the writing on the wall. They need to start adjusting their finances to be able to live through what's going to happen. And not just like survive, but thrive. And so what are some of the things people can do to kind of stomach this?
Yeah, I think one of the things people have to do is definitely diversify their income streams. It comes.
I think that's really important, especially if your job is in one of those industries that will be impacted by the tariffs. You may lose your job. And if your 9-to-5 job is your only source of income, you could definitely be in trouble. So definitely diversifying your income. The other thing I think people need to look at is their budget. If people are spending money on products or services that are coming from outside of the U.S. right now, and they're so reliant on that, like, they buy a lot of avocados or they drink a lot of Corona, maybe they need to switch to Budweiser. I don't know. I don't know how you can make up for the avocados.
No, I like that. It's like in our 365 Days to Fire program, we tell people, build a 72-hour list, build a wants versus needs list. And maybe it's taking some time to actually build a list of products that you use, things that you use daily, and understanding where those actual products are coming from so that you understand the future impact that your budget may have because of that. And you can start looking at perhaps there are alternative products. So if you have a list of things that are coming from these countries that are getting these high tariffs, start to think of alternative products where they might not see that same impact from those tariffs.
And the other thing is, if you were thinking about getting a new car, if you were thinking about upgrading your electronics, you should probably be holding off for a while. Wait for a while and see how this whole thing pans out. Because just buying a car now, they're saying on average it's going to cost you $6,000 more now to buy a car
because of the tariffs.
So big ticket items, you may want to hold off on that. The other thing is, I know that we have a lot of investors that watch our channel, and they are going to see the stock market going crazy. And I want people to weather the storm, right? Keep doing what you've always done. Stick to your investment plan. If you have been dollar cost averaging into the market, keep doing it, because there's no telling how the market is going to react to these tariffs. And these tariffs could be here today and they could be gone next week. And how is the stock market going to react when all the tariffs are gone? You just never know how the market is going to react. And there's no such thing as like being able to time the market. A successful investor doesn't time the market. They spend time in the market. So stay invested, stick to your plan, and in the long run, you will benefit from the inevitable growth of the stock market.
Yeah, I think that is the most important thing. Have that long-term perspective when you are investing. You're going to see a lot of volatility, ups and downs, but keeping that long-term perspective of 10 years or more, thinking about what your portfolio could grow to at that period and leaving your money in, consistently investing despite the volatility in the stock market. I think that's really important. For those of you that want to learn more about investing, are feeling anxious about investing, and really need a solid understanding of how to invest in the stock market, we actually have a stock market investing course, and it helps you develop your stock market investing plan and really sticking through it and weathering the storms. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to ourrichjourney.com, or we'll also leave a link in the description below.
And this is the last thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
Is financial security. If you have high interest debt right now, if you are, living paycheck to paycheck, tighten up your finances right now. That emergency fund that you had that was 3 to 6 months, you might want to plus up that emergency fund, because if we go into a period of recession, if we go into a period where there's job loss, you want to have enough cash set aside to be able to weather that storm. So if you are holding high interest debt, please take care of that high interest debt, because it's gonna eat you alive. You can't invest if you got high interest debt. And so make sure that your financial security is in order should the day come where we have to pull back because your income isn't there. And I just hope that everyone is trying to be optimistic at a time like this. I know that all this uncertainty can be scary, and it can hold you back from pursuing your fire journey, your fire dreams. But times like this have come and gone. And the people that are staying focused on their journeys, focused on their plan, these are the most successful people at a time like this. So we just wanted to share our reaction to the Trump tariffs. Keep an eye on the news, because stuff is going to be changing every day, but don't get too scared by it. Continue to do what you have been doing. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and
Join the journey.